Captain Vrek-Tol adjusted his 3 eye stalks and let out what could only be described as the galactic equivalent of a heavy sigh. His mandibles clicked in annoyance as he stared at the communication panel that had been blinking incessantly for the past solar cycle. The message was simple, almost laughably so: human vessel in distress. Coordinates attached. Please assist. Please assist, he muttered, his voice carrying the distinctive buzz of his species. As if we have nothing better to do than chase after some lost mammal who probably ran out of fuel because they were too busy playing their ridiculous music too loud. His first officer, Lieutenant QX-9, bobbed her gelatinous form in what passed for agreement among the Zlorthians. The humans do have a reputation, Captain. Last week, one of their ships nearly collided with a space station because the pilot was apparently doing something called dancing while operating the controls. The bridge fell silent, except for the soft humming of the life support systems. The crew of the merchant vessel Prophet's Edge had been hauling cargo between the outer rim worlds for cycles now, and they'd encountered their fair share of distress calls. Most were legitimate emergencies. Some were pirates trying to lure unsuspecting vessels into traps, and then there were the humans. Humans, in Vrek-Tol's considerable experience, fell into a category all their own. They were the species that would somehow manage to get their ship stuck in a nebula while trying to see what would happen if we flew through that pretty cloud. They were the ones who would send out distress signals because they'd run out of coffee and couldn't function without their daily dose of liquid stimulant. "Sir," called out Navigation Officer Tech Vash from his station, his 4 arms working frantically over the controls. "I'm picking up the vessel on long-range sensors. It's definitely human design. Looks like one of their smaller research ships." "Research," Vrek-Tol repeated, his tone dripping with the kind of sarcasm that transcended species barriers. "Let me guess. They were researching how close they could get to a black hole before getting sucked in, or maybe they were testing whether their ship could survive atmospheric entry without proper heat shielding?" A new voice piped up from the communication station. "Actually, Captain," said Ensign Zeke-Pol, her voice tinged with something that might have been amusement, "according to their emergency beacon, they're a xenobiology team. It says here they were studying the mating habits of space whales." The bridge erupted in what could generously be called laughter, though it sounded more like a collection of dying air filtration systems. Space whales were massive creatures that migrated through the void between stars, and studying their mating habits was about as useful as counting grains of sand on a beach. It was the kind of research that only humans would consider worthwhile. "Of course they were," Vrek-Tol said, his mandibles clicking rapidly. "Because naturally, the best way to study creatures that are larger than most space stations is to get close enough to watch them. It do whatever it is they do when they're feeling romantic." He stood up from his command chair, his exoskeleton creaking slightly with the movement. The decision was already made, really. Despite his complaints and his species' general opinion of human intelligence, he couldn't just leave them floating in space. The Galactic Compact required all spacefaring species to render aid when possible, and besides, humans had an annoying habit of remembering who helped them and who didn't. "Helm, set course for the coordinates. Maximum safe speed." "Aye, Captain," replied the helmsman, a quiet Borthak whose name Vrek-Tol could never properly pronounce. Estimated time to arrival: 4 hours, 17 minutes. As the Prophet's Edge changed course, Vrek-Tol found himself wondering what exactly they'd find when they reached the distress signal. In his experience, human emergencies range from the genuinely life-threatening to the utterly ridiculous, often with no clear way to tell which was which until you were already committed to helping. "Osundao." 3 hours later, they got their answer. "Captain," Tech Vash called out, his voice carrying a note of confusion, "I'm reading massive energy signatures ahead. Whatever's happening out there, it's big." The main screen flickered to life, displaying the view ahead of them. What they saw made every member of the crew pause in their respective activities. The human research vessel Curiosity's Dream was indeed in distress, but not in the way anyone had expected. The ship was surrounded by what appeared to be an entire pod of space whales, each one easily the size of a small moon. Their translucent bodies pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that created a light show visible from millions of kilometers away. And in the center of this cosmic ballet, the tiny human ship looked like a child's toy caught in a hurricane. "Well," Vrek-Tol said after a long moment, "that's new. Captain." Zigpol's voice crackled with static from the communication array. "I'm receiving a transmission from the human vessel. Audio only, but the signal's weak. Put it through." "Go." The bridge filled with the sound of human voices, tinged with what was unmistakably panic but also, strangely, excitement. "Anyone receiving this? We are the research vessel Curiosity's Dream. We're experiencing a bit of a situation here. Our engines are down, life support is running on backup power, and we're currently surrounded by approximately 47 space whales who seem to have mistaken our ship for, well, we're not entirely sure what they think we are, but they're being very friendly about it." A different voice came through the comm, this one belonging to a human female. "What Jake's trying to say is that we accidentally triggered some kind of mating response in the local whale population, and now they think our ship is either a very small whale or possibly a very large whale egg. They keep trying to, well, nurture us." "Nurture us?" The first voice again. "Sarah, they're trying to feed us. Do you see that one over there? It's been regurgitating partially digested space plankton at our hull for the past 6 hours. Vrek-Tol felt his mandibles go slack. Of all the possible scenarios he'd imagined, this wasn't even close to making the list. The humans had somehow convinced an entire pod of space whales that their ship was a baby whale in need of care and feeding. "This is Captain Vrek-Tol of the merchant vessel Prophet's Edge," he transmitted. "We received your distress call. What exactly is your situation? And please, be specific. Because from where I'm sitting it looks like you've been adopted by the galaxy's largest nursery." The relief in the human voices was palpable. "Oh, thank the stars. Captain, we are so glad to hear from you. This is Dr. Jake Morrison, head of the xenobiology team. We were conducting long-range observations of the whale pod when our stealth systems malfunctioned. The whales detected us, and, well, they've been trying to take care of us ever since. They won't let us leave," added the female voice, Dr. Sarah Chen. "Every time we try to power up our engines, they start making these distress calls that are loud enough to shake our teeth loose. We think they're afraid we're going to hurt ourselves." Lieutenant QX9 rippled with what might have been laughter. "Captain, we're being asked to perform a custody battle with space whales over a human research ship." "I heard that," came Dr. Morrison's voice. "And for the record, we prefer to think of it as a diplomatic negotiation with concerned interstellar wildlife." Vrek-Tol found himself in the unusual position of being genuinely impressed. Most species would have panicked, tried to blast their way out, and probably ended up as space whale food. The humans, on the other hand, had apparently spent 6 hours documenting the behavior patterns of creatures that could swallow their ship whole. "Dr. Morrison," he said, "what's your ship's current status? Hull integrity, life support, food supplies?" "Hull's intact, though we've got some interesting biological samples stuck to the outer plating. Life support is holding, but we're down to about 18 hours of reserve power. Food, well, we've got emergency rations for maybe another day, but honestly, the whales keep offering us their food and we're starting to wonder if it might be edible." "Do not," Vrek-Tol said firmly, "eat space whale vomit. I don't care how curious you are about xenobiology," noted Captain. "So, any ideas on how to explain to a pod of protective space whales that we're not actually their baby and we need to go home now?" Vrek-Tol looked around his bridge. His crew was staring at him with expressions that ranged from amused to baffled to genuinely concerned. This was rapidly becoming the strangest rescue mission of his career. And that was saying something given that he'd once had to extract a human diplomat from a planet where the dominant species communicated through interpretive dance. "We're going to need to get creative," he said finally. "Tech Vash, how long until we reach their position?" 53 minutes, Captain." "Good." Zigpol, open a channel to the research vessel. "Dr. Morrison, Dr. Chen, we're going to attempt a rescue." But I need you to do exactly what I tell you when I tell you to do it. These creatures are clearly intelligent and protective. If we approach this wrong, we could end up with an interstellar incident on our hands. Understood, Captain. And thank you. We really appreciate this. Vrek-Tol settled back into his command chair, his mind already working through the possibilities. Space whales were notoriously difficult to understand, communicating through a combination of electromagnetic pulses, gravitational waves, and subsonic vibrations that could travel through the vacuum of space. They were also known to be incredibly protective of their young. Sir, Ensign Vrek-Tol spoke up, I've been monitoring the whale pod's communication patterns. They're definitely treating the human ship as if it were a juvenile of their species. The acoustic signatures match recorded whale conversations from the archives. Can we translate any of it? Some of it, yes. Mostly variations on stay close, don't wander off, and eat your food. There's also a lot of what appears to be cooing. The absurdity of the situation was not lost on Vrek-Tol. Here he was, a respectable merchant captain with a reputation for efficiency and pragmatism, about to engage in interspecies negotiations with cosmic cetaceans over the custody of a human research team. Captain, Dr. Chen's voice came through the comm again. We're picking up some kind of singing. The whales are singing. And it's beautiful but also really, really loud. Our ship is vibrating like a tuning fork. Through the static, they could hear it. It's a deep, resonant melody that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly in the chest. It was hauntingly beautiful and utterly alien, the sound of creatures larger than cities expressing emotions that no terrestrial species could fully comprehend. They're singing a lullaby, Vrek-Tol reported, her voice filled with wonder. According to the translation matrix, it's about keeping the little ones safe and warm until it's ready to swim with the pod. Of course it is. Vrek-Tol muttered. We're not just dealing with protective whales, we're dealing with protective whales who think they're babysitting. The Prophet's Edge dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the whale pod's territory, and the sight that greeted them was unlike anything in Vrek-Tol's considerable experience. The space whales moved through the void with a grace that defied their massive size, their bioluminescent displays creating patterns of light that shifted and flowed like living auroras. And there, in the center of it all, was the Curiosity's dream, looking impossibly small and fragile, surrounded by creatures that could have been living asteroids. Well, Vrek-Tol said, his voice carrying a mix of admiration and disbelief, this is either going to be the most successful rescue of my career, or the most spectacular failure. Either way, it's definitely going to be interesting. The space whales had noticed their arrival. Several of the massive creatures were turning toward them, their songs shifting to what the translation software identified as curious inquiry mixed with protective warning. Here we go, Vrek-Tol murmured, and began composing what he hoped would be the galaxy's first successful diplomatic overture to a pod of cosmic whales who had adopted a human research ship. This was definitely not covered in any of the emergency protocols he'd memorized during his academy training. The largest space whale in the pod, a creature so massive it had its own gravitational field, slowly rotated toward the Prophet's Edge. Its song deepened to a bass note that made the ship's hull vibrate like a struck bell. Every crew member on the bridge felt their bones resonate with the sound. Translation coming through now, Captain, Vrek-Tol announced, her voice tight with concentration. It's asking who we are and what our intentions are regarding, and I quote, the small lost child. Vrek-Tol rubbed his temple with one claw. The small lost child. Right. Because a 30-meter research vessel piloted by adult xenobiologists is clearly an infant whale. He activated the communication array. Dr. Morrison, what's your ship's acoustic output capability? We've got standard communication arrays, emergency beacons, and Jake has a really good sound system for his music collection. Why do you ask? Because we're going to have to convince your adoptive parents that you're old enough to leave home, Lieutenant QX9 bobbed nervously. Captain, are you seriously planning to communicate with space whales using human music, not just any music? Vrek-Tol replied, a plan forming in his mind. Dr. Morrison, I need you to play the most mature, sophisticated piece of music you have, something that sounds adult, responsible, like the kind of thing a fully grown whale might sing. There was a pause from the human ship. Captain, I'm not sure you understand how human music works. We don't exactly have whale opera in our collection. Then improvise. You're scientists. Be scientific about it. What happened next would later be recorded in the Galactic archives as either the most brilliant example of interspecies communication ever attempted, or the most ridiculous. The humans began broadcasting what Dr. Morrison called classical symphony music, specifically something by a composer named Beethoven. The effect on the whale pod was immediate and dramatic. The protective circle around the Curiosity's dream loosened slightly as the massive creatures tilted their heads, listening to the strange new song emanating from their supposed offspring. It's working, Tech Vash reported from his sensor station. The whales are. They're singing back. They're harmonizing with the music. What followed was perhaps the most surreal concert in galactic history. 47 space whales, each the size of a small city, began adding their voices to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. The cosmic chorus created harmonies that no human composer could have imagined, turning the vacuum of space into a concert hall that spanned light years. Captain. Dr. Chen's voice came through the comm. Filled with wonder and barely contained excitement, they're not just singing along. They're improvising. They're adding their own melodies to the music. This is first contact through symphony. Vrek-Tol had to admit it was impressive, even if it was completely insane. Dr. Morrison, slowly increase the volume and complexity of your broadcast. Make it sound like you're growing up, musically speaking. The humans complied, transitioning from classical to something they called jazz fusion, then to progressive rock. With each change, the whales adapted their songs, their melodies becoming more complex and sophisticated. It was as if they were watching their adopted child mature before their eyes. Sensors show the whales are backing away from the human vessel, reported Tech Vash. They're giving it more space. Good. Now comes the tricky part. Vrek-Tol opened a general communication channel. All ships were going to attempt extraction. Dr. Morrison, when I give the signal, cut your music and power up your engines slowly, very slowly. Make it look like you're learning to swim, not trying to escape. Understood, Captain. And just so you know, this is either going to make for the best research paper ever written, or the most embarrassing obituary in scientific history. Vrek-Tol maneuvered the Prophet's Edge closer to the whale pod, careful to broadcast peaceful intentions through every communication channel his ship possessed. The whales watched him approach, their songs shifting to what his translator identified as curious greeting mixed with protective suspicion. Zik Pol. Can you synthesize a message in whale speak? Something along the lines of, I'm here to help the little one learn to swim properly? I can try, Captain, but whale grammar is, well, it's mostly emotional resonance and gravitational pulses. I might accidentally tell them you want to adopt their child or challenge them to a mating display. Just try not to start an interstellar incident. The message went out. A complex series of electromagnetic pulses and sonic frequencies that the ship's computers had cobbled together from the translation database. The response was immediate. The largest whale in the pod approached the Prophet's Edge, its massive eye fixing on the much smaller vessel. For a moment that felt like hours, the two ships faced each other in the void. Then, slowly, the whale began to sing. The translation came through as something like, Are you here to teach the small one the ways of the deep void? Yes, Vrek-Tol transmitted back, hoping his ship's computers were getting the translation right. I am an elder swimmer, here to guide the young one to new feeding grounds. Captain. Dr. Morrison's voice crackled through the comm. I think the whales just expressed gratitude that a responsible adult has finally shown up to deal with us. That's actually not inaccurate, Vrek-Tol muttered. All right, Dr. Morrison. Very slowly begin moving toward my position. Make it look casual, like you're just swimming over to say hello. The Curiosity's dream began to move, its engines barely above idle. The whales watched with what appeared to be parental pride as their adopted offspring took its first tentative steps toward independence. Several of the smaller whales began singing what the translator identified as encouragement. "They're cheering us on," Dr. Chen reported, her voice filled with emotion. "Captain, they're actually proud of us for finally learning to swim properly." As the human ship slowly made its way toward the Prophet's edge, the whale pod began to disperse, but they didn't leave entirely. Instead, they formed a wide circle around both vessels, their songs shifting to what sounded like farewell blessings. "Translation coming through," Vrek-Tol announced. "They're wishing the young ones safe travels and hoping it will return someday to visit the pod." "Of course they are," Vrek-Tol said, though his tone was softer now. "They're saying goodbye to their adopted child." Giddy Fang. The Curiosity's dream finally reached the Prophet's edge, and both ships began to move away from the whale pod. The massive creatures sang their farewells, a haunting melody that followed the departing vessels for millions of kilometers. Captain Dr. Morrison transmitted once they were clear of the pod, "We can't thank you enough. You didn't just save our lives, you helped us complete the most extraordinary xenobiological study in human history." "Just doing my job," Vrek-Tol replied, though he couldn't keep a note of satisfaction out of his voice. "Though I have to ask, how exactly did you manage to convince an entire pod of space whales that your ship was their baby?" "Well, Dr. Chen said," and Vrek-Tol could hear the embarrassment in her voice, "we may have been broadcasting whale songs from our database while we were observing them. You know, for comparison purposes. We didn't realize our ship's acoustic signature was similar enough to a juvenile whale to trigger their parental instincts. You were playing whale lullabies while studying whale mating habits. When you put it like that, it sounds really stupid." "That's because it was really stupid," Vrek-Tol said, but his tone was more amused than critical. "Though I have to admit, the results were unique." 3 months later, Captain Vrek-Tol was enjoying a quiet drink at a space station bar when his communicator chimed. The message was from Dr. Morrison and Dr. Chen, now famous throughout the galaxy for their groundbreaking research on space whale social behavior. "Captain Vrek-Tol," the message read, "we hope this finds you well. We wanted you to know that our research has been published and is already leading to new breakthroughs in xenobiology. We've also been contracted by the Galactic Science Council to establish the first space whale sanctuary. None of this would have been possible without your help. We owe you more than we can ever repay." Vrek-Tol was about to delete the message when a second one arrived. This one was different, marked with official Galactic Fleet communication codes. "Attention Captain Vrek-Tol of the merchant vessel Prophet's Edge. You are hereby requested to report to Sector Command for immediate consultation regarding urgent xenobiological crisis in the Andorian system. Recommend approach with extreme caution. Details classified. Authorization: Dr. Jake Morrison, Chief Xenobiologist, Galactic Science Council." Vrek-Tol stared at the message, a sense of foreboding settling in his stomach. He activated his communicator and placed a call to the Curiosity's dream. "Dr. Morrison, this is Captain Vrek-Tol. I just received a rather ominous message about an urgent crisis. What exactly is happening in the Andorian system?" The response came quickly, and Vrek-Tol could hear the excitement and panic in the human's voice. "Captain, thank the stars you called. We have a situation. A massive situation. Remember how we established that space whale sanctuary? Well, it seems word got out among the whale community, and we now have approximately 3,000 space whales converging on the sanctuary from across the galaxy. 3,000. Maybe more. They're still arriving, and Captain, they're not just coming to the sanctuary. They're bringing their young. All of their young. Every juvenile space whale in known space is heading for the Andorian system, and they all seem to expect the same level of care and attention that we accidentally provided to our adoptive pod." Vrek-Tol felt his mandibles go slack. "Let me understand this correctly. You've accidentally created the galaxy's largest space whale nursery, and now every adult whale in known space is dropping off their children for you to babysit. That's actually a very accurate summary, yes. And you called me because? Because, Captain, you're the only being in the galaxy who has successfully negotiated with space whales about child custody. We need your help. The Galactic fleet is mobilizing, but they want someone with experience in whale diplomacy to lead the mission. Vrek-Tol looked at his barely touched drink and sighed. Dr. Morrison, how many ships are we talking about? Well, the fleet is sending a full exploration squadron, 12 ships, including 3 research vessels, 2 diplomatic cruisers, and a mobile space station to serve as a coordination center. Oh, and Captain? They're offering to commission you as a temporary fleet captain for the duration of the mission. For a moment, Vrek-Tol couldn't speak. A fleet commission was the kind of honor that most merchant captains only dreamed of. And all because he'd helped 2 humans escape from their overprotective adoptive whale family. Captain? Dr. Morrison's voice came through the comm. Are you still there? I'm here, Vrek-Tol replied. Just processing the fact that my entire career is apparently going to be defined by space whale diplomacy. Look at it this way, Captain. You're about to become the galaxy's first official space whale ambassador. That's got to look good on a resume. Vrek-Tol found himself laughing despite the absurdity of the situation. Dr. Morrison, you humans have a talent for turning simple rescue missions into galactic incidents. We prefer to think of it as making history, Captain. Fine. Send me the coordinates. And Dr. Morrison? Next time you decide to study something, maybe pick a species that doesn't have parental instincts, noted Captain. Though I should mention, we're also working on a project involving space dolphins, and early indications suggest they might be even more social than the whales. The communication cut out, leaving Vrek-Tol staring at his communicator in horror. Space dolphins. Of course, the humans were studying space dolphins. He finished his drink in one gulp and headed for his ship, already composing his acceptance of the fleet commission. After all, someone had to keep the humans from accidentally adopting the entire galaxy's worth of cosmic cetaceans. And apparently that someone was him. Years later, when historians wrote about the great space whale migration and the establishment of the Galactic Cetacean Protection Protocols, they would note that it all began with a simple rescue mission. A merchant captain had answered a distress call from 2 human scientists, and in doing so, had changed the course of interspecies relations forever. But Vrek-Tol, now Admiral Vrek-Tol of the Galactic Fleet's Xenobiological Division, preferred a simpler summary. I helped some humans once. Now I run a cosmic petting zoo. The moral of the story, if there was one, was distinctly human in its simplicity. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness echo across the stars in ways you never expect. And sometimes, those echoes come back as an entire fleet answering your call. Even if that call is asking for help with 3,000 baby space whales who think you're their babysitter.